You know, for as long as I can remember, we've all been told there's really only one path to success. You got to start early. You have to specialize like crazy, and whatever you do, don't deviate. But what if that's not just wrong, but the exact opposite of what works in the real world? Today, we're jumping into David Epstein's Range, a book that seriously challenges this whole idea and makes a powerful case for the generalist.
So that really gets to the heart of it, right? What is the best path to greatness? Are you better off becoming an absolute master of one thing and one thing only? Or is it better to build a broader, more varied toolkit of skills and experiences?
And to really dig into this, the book kicks things off by looking at two modern legends, two absolute icons who took completely different roads to the very top of their game.
So in one corner, you've got Tiger Woods. I mean, this is the ultimate specialist, right? He basically had a golf club put in his hands at age 2 and was put on this path of intense, focused training from the time he was a toddler. It's the story we all know and the one our culture just loves to celebrate. But then you have Roger Federer. He was out there dabbling in everything. Soccer, skiing, wrestling, you name it. He didn't even decide to focus only on tennis until he was a teenager. And here's the kicker, the really surprising part. The research actually shows that Federer's path, the generalist's path, is way more common among elite performers.
So what's going on here? Why does this generalist path so often win out in the end? Well, the answer all comes down to the kind of environment you're actually playing in. Let's break down this core idea from the book. See, the book breaks the world down into two types of learning environments. First, you have kind environments. Think of things like chess or golf. Here, the rules are perfectly clear, the same patterns repeat over and over, and every time you do something, you get instant, accurate feedback. It's the perfect place for that 10,000-hour rule to work. But how much of your life is actually like that? Because most of life, our careers, our relationships, you name it, operates in what the book calls wicked environments. The rules are fuzzy, patterns might not repeat at all, and the feedback you get is often slow or sometimes just flat out wrong.
And this right here, this is the perfect way to think about it. It's the central mismatch. We spend all this time training ourselves for these neat, tidy gardens where everything has its place and the rules are obvious. But the world we actually have to live and work in, it's a misty forest. The path isn't clear and the rules are always changing. We're literally using the wrong map for the territory.
And in these wicked, misty forests, that deep specialization can actually become a trap. The book calls it a cognitive rut. When the game totally changes, it's often the specialists who have the hardest time adapting. They hold on tight to the tools they know, even when those tools are the wrong ones for the new job. The book tells the tragic story of the Man Gulch fire, which is a devastating example. These expert firefighters were so trained to never lose their tools that they couldn't bring themselves to drop their heavy equipment to outrun the fire, and tragically, it cost them their lives.
Okay, so if digging a super deep, narrow hole is risky, what's the alternative? Well, it all starts with what the book calls a sampling period, a time of broad exploration.
I mean, just look at one of the most famous late bloomers in history, Vincent van Gogh. Before he was the Van Gogh, he was an art dealer, then an assistant teacher, then a bookstore clerk. He even tried to be a pastor and failed at it. His path was anything but a straight line.
What his journey shows us is that all that stuff that looks like wasted time from the outside, it's actually this vital process of discovery. This sampling period is how you figure out what you're actually good at, and maybe even more important, what you actually love to do. It's not about falling behind. It's about figuring out who you are in the first place. And this leads to a pretty wild idea, one that totally flips that never give up mantra we all hear. Sometimes, quitting is the smartest thing you can do. Look, the goal here isn't to just bounce around forever. The real goal is to find what economists call match quality. That's the sweet spot, that perfect fit between the work you do and who you are as a person, your skills and your passions. And this is the absolute key, right here. Trying a bunch of different things isn't a sign of being unfocused. It's a strategy. You're gathering data points on the most important subject there is, yourself. You need that data to make a good decision about where to eventually dig deep. And hey, this isn't just a nice idea. There's real data. A cool study compared students in the UK. So in England and Wales, you have to specialize really early. But in Scotland, you're required to sample a bunch of different subjects for a couple of years. And the result? The Scottish students found much better career fits. They were way less likely to switch out of their fields later. And guess what? They eventually caught up in earnings to those who specialized early.
All right, so sampling helps you find the right fit. But what's the actual cognitive advantage here? In that messy, wicked world we talked about, what is the generalist's secret weapon for solving the really tough problems?
It comes down to this superpower called analogical thinking. It's the ability to look at a totally new problem and ask, what does this remind me of? It means you could look past the surface stuff and see the deep structure that connects things that seem completely unrelated.
Okay, here's a classic puzzle that just makes this crystal clear. Imagine you have a patient with a tumor. You have a ray that can destroy it, but at full strength, it'll also destroy all the healthy tissue it passes through. How do you do it? Well, the solution comes from a totally different world, a military problem. How do you capture a fortress? You don't send one giant army down one road, you send small groups of soldiers down many different roads to all arrive at the same time. And that's the answer. You use multiple weaker rays from different angles that all converge right on the tumor. It's a brilliant leap that specialists stuck in their medical silo often miss.
And once you start looking, you see this everywhere. The double helix structure of DNA, not solved by chemists, but by a zoologist and a physicist. The airplane, invented by a couple of bicycle mechanics. Post-it notes, they came from using a failed super weak glue for a brand new problem. Real innovation so often happens at these intersections where different worlds collide.
Okay, this all sounds great in theory, but how do you actually do this? How do you build your own range, starting today? Let's talk about a practical toolkit you can use. Okay, number 1, embrace the sampling period. Give yourself permission to try new things, even if it feels inefficient. 2, actively practice that analogical thinking. Constantly ask yourself, what is this an example of? What does this problem remind me of? 3, seek out what are called desirable difficulties, challenges that are just outside your comfort zone. And finally, number 4, learn to see your winding path not as a liability, but as your secret weapon.
Let's just pause on that desirable difficulties idea for a second, because it's so important. Cognitive psychology tells us that when learning feels too easy, we often forget it just as easily. But it's the struggle, the slow, frustrating process of really grappling with something that builds deep, flexible knowledge. That frustration you feel when you're learning something new, that's a good thing. That's your brain actually building knowledge that will stick. At the end of the day, you can't just think your way into your passion. You can't sit in a room and plan out the perfect career. The research is so clear on this. We learn who we are by doing things. We try something, we get feedback from the world, and we adjust. It's an active process. So look, if there's one single thing you take away from all this, let it be this. If you've got diverse interests, if your resume looks more like a winding road than a straight line, if you feel like you got a late start, you are not behind. You are building range. And in our complex, wicked world, that's one of the biggest advantages you can have.
So I want to leave you with a question to chew on. The next time you're up against a really big, tough problem, either at work or in your life, how could you step outside your expertise? How could you borrow an idea or a tool from a totally different field? How could building your own range help you see the solution that everyone else is missing?